She was just trying to get home before dark, clutching her daughter's hand as they crossed the quiet street. No crime, no argument, just a mother and child on their way from the grocery store. But flashing lights shattered the calm. Within moments, voices turned sharp, commands flew, and confusion turned into chaos. The officers didn't ask questions. They didn't listen. They saw only what they wanted to see, a black woman who didn't belong in that neighborhood. Her daughter screamed as rough hands pulled her mother away, and no one stepped in. What they didn't know was who she really was, or the man she loved and lost. The man who once wore the same uniform they did. By the time the truth came out, it was too late to undo the damage. But the question remains, how many times must a woman be broken before justice finally sees her? Tell me, where are you watching this from today? It had been 3 years since Denise Carter lost her husband in the line of duty. He was a decorated Army officer, a man who believed in honor, justice, and doing what was right, even when no one was watching. After his passing, Denise held on to his values like a lifeline, raising their 8-year-old daughter, Ava, in the quiet suburb they had once dreamed of calling home. Life wasn't easy, but Denise made it work. She took double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, volunteered at church on weekends, and made sure Ava never went a day without feeling loved. Her neighbors saw her as reserved but kind, the type of woman who smiled even when her eyes told a different story. Every morning began the same: breakfast, school drop-off, work, then home before sunset. It was a routine that gave her comfort, a sense of control in a world that had already taken too much from her. But beneath the calm surface, there was always a flicker of unease, a quiet awareness that being a black woman, even in a good neighborhood, came with invisible rules. Still, Denise believed in keeping her head high and moving forward. She taught Ava to say yes, and thank you, to be polite, to never give anyone a reason to misunderstand. But on that Friday evening, as the sun dipped low and the wind carried the faint sound of sirens, something in the air felt different. She couldn't explain it, but her heart felt heavy. She glanced at Ava and smiled anyway, pretending everything was fine. After all, it was just another ordinary walk home. Or so she thought. The street was quiet when Denise and Ava turned the corner, the last bit of sunlight slipping behind the houses. Ava hummed softly, swinging her mother's hand, clutching her small backpack with the other. It was the kind of peaceful moment Denise cherished, the kind that made her forget how heavy life could feel. But that calm shattered the second she saw the flashing lights. A police cruiser slowed beside them, tires crunching over the curb. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions hard and unreadable. Denise froze, unsure if they were responding to something nearby. Then one of them barked, "Stop right there." Confusion flickered across her face. "Is something wrong, officer?" she asked carefully, her voice steady but cautious. The older officer's gaze swept over her grocery bag, her scrubs, and then settled on her skin. "Got a call about a suspicious person matching your description," he said flatly. Her heart dropped. Suspicious? She looked around, empty street, no one else in sight. "I just came from work," she said, holding up her hospital ID. But the younger officer moved closer, hand resting on his holster as if her words meant nothing. Ava gripped her mother's leg, whispering, "Mommy, what's happening?" Denise forced a calm smile she didn't feel. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. But it wasn't okay. Not when one officer reached for her arm, pulling her bag from her hand, groceries spilling across the pavement. Not when the other started questioning where she lived, how she could afford to live there, and why she looked nervous. The humiliation burned hotter than fear. Neighbors peeked through curtains but didn't come out. Denise felt every second stretch like hours. She wanted to scream, but she knew how quickly anger could be mistaken for threat. Then, one officer muttered something about resisting when she instinctively stepped back. The next moment, she was on the ground, knees scraping against the asphalt, her daughter crying hysterically. "I'm not resisting," she cried out, but her words drowned beneath the static of the police radio. The sound of cuffs clicking around her wrists was deafening. As she lay there, tears mixing with dirt, her mind flashed to her husband's photo, his proud smile in uniform, his medals, his promise to protect. If only they knew who she was, she thought. If only they knew who he was. A crowd began to gather. Someone pulled out a phone. The world, once quiet, now buzzed with tension. The officers barked orders, but their voices trembled, not with authority, but with the fear of being exposed. Because moments later, one of them found her wallet. He opened it, and froze at the sight of a folded photograph. A man in military uniform, arm around Denise, badge gleaming in the sun. "Wait," he said under his breath, color draining from his face. "That's Captain Marcus Carter." The name hit the air like thunder. The same name engraved on the town's war memorial. The same hero they all claimed to honor every Memorial Day. For the first time, silence fell. Denise's breathing slowed, her eyes wet but unbroken. The truth was finally out, but the damage was already done. And as the bystanders' phones kept recording, one thought echoed through her mind: would they have stopped if he were still alive? If stories like this move you, make sure you're subscribed, because more real stories like this deserve to be heard. The video from that night spread like wildfire. Within hours, Denise's name and face were everywhere, on social media, in news clips, on screens that replayed the horror over and over again. The image of her on the pavement, wrists bound, her daughter screaming beside her, it burned into the nation's conscience. But while the world saw a headline, Denise still felt the bruises. She still heard her daughter's cries echoing in her mind. That night, after being released without charges, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the folded flag that once covered her husband's coffin. The same flag those officers were sworn to honor. The irony cut deep. Her home, once filled with laughter and his memory, now felt like a battlefield. Outside, protesters began gathering. Signs went up. Voices rose. But inside, Denise was silent. She didn't want pity, she wanted truth. She wanted accountability. Because she knew this wasn't just her story, it was the story of countless others who never got a camera pointed their way. Then came the press conference. The police chief stood behind a podium, face stern, words rehearsed: "We regret the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. The word hit like a slap. Denise stood in the back of the room, holding Ava's hand, listening to men in uniforms talk about procedure and protocol as if they could explain away humiliation. When she finally stepped forward, the room went still. Cameras turned. Her voice didn't tremble. "My husband wore your uniform," she said softly. "He fought for this country. He believed in justice. And yet, tonight, his widow was treated like a criminal for walking home." You could have heard a pin drop. The officers avoided her gaze. The chief's jaw tightened. In that moment, Denise wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for every mother, every daughter, every family who had been silenced, dismissed, or forgotten. Her pain became a mirror, and no one in that room could look away. As she turned to leave, Ava's small voice carried through the crowd. "Mommy, are they going to say sorry?" Denise paused, her hand tightening around her daughter's. She didn't have an answer. But in her silence, the truth was louder than any apology could ever be. The cameras kept rolling, the flashes bursting like lightning. And somewhere in that sea of faces, one thought began to take hold, a realization that could no longer be ignored. This wasn't just another story of injustice. This was the breaking point. In the weeks that followed, Denise's life became a symbol of something far larger than herself. The footage of her arrest continued to circulate, sparking outrage, marches, and demands for reform. But while the world debated policies and procedures, Denise focused on something simpler: healing. She went back to work at the hospital, even when whispers followed her down the hall. She held her head high when people stared, when some avoided eye contact, unsure of what to say. Every day, she reminded herself that survival was its own quiet form of resistance. The department issued an official apology. The officers were placed on leave. Statements were made, committees formed, and promises repeated. Yet Denise knew, true change couldn't come from paperwork. It had to come from hearts that finally saw what she had lived through. At night, she'd tuck Ava into bed, the little girl still waking from nightmares. "Are you okay now, Mommy?" she'd ask. And Denise would smile, though her heart still ached. "I will be," she'd say. Because this time, she wasn't just a victim. She was a voice. She spoke at schools, community centers, vigils, anywhere people would listen. She told her story, not for sympathy, but for understanding. For awareness. For justice. Her husband's photo now sat on her desk, not as a memory of loss, but as a reminder of strength. The uniform he once wore didn't represent what she endured that night, but the ideals he believed in. The ones she refused to give up on. Months later, during a memorial event for fallen officers, Denise was invited to speak. The same department that once looked through her now stood to listen. She didn't speak with anger, she spoke with truth. "Justice isn't a badge," she said quietly. "It's how you treat the people you swore to protect. My husband believed that. And I still do." Her words cut through the air like a promise, a demand for a world where no mother fears the walk home, no child watches their parent fall, and no one's worth is questioned because of the color of their skin. As she stepped down from the stage, applause filled the air. But Denise didn't smile for the cameras. She smiled for Ava, waiting in the front row, because she knew this fight was for her future. And as the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, one question lingered in every heart that heard her story. How many more lives must be shattered before justice finally sees color and decides to look deeper?